Okay, welcome back, everyone. Wow, I have no idea when my mic is on. I was literally just talking about clothes. Thank you for not turning that on when I was talking about shopping. Welcome back to the Youth Summit here at Radiodays Europe. We are on the home stretch. And what is up on the screen is pretty interesting because we've been telling you all day long to create content for the youth, to get them into your radio station, and now we're about to tell you to give up the youth. Sounds crazy, and yes, we're crazy here, but it's not really me, it's the other guys. Simon Gooch as well. You're not crazy, I wasn't gonna say that, but let's give it up for Simon because he is going to lead this conversation about, giving up the youth and using it as a strategy to work. Simon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I will provide some background before we hear from Simon. So 3 years ago, what I found interesting is Simon was here at Radiodays Europe, not in Munich, but in Sweden. And he, gave a pitch and a presentation about how Swedish Radio relaunched their youth channel P3. And what they did was that they gave up the youth as a target audience because they strongly believed in stopping the listening slide. And now, 4 years after that relaunch, P3 has more listeners in the age group of 20 to 34 years old than before. When I saw this part of the presentation, I could only think about, wow, this is like reverse psychology.
Something
or
like that, yeah.
In the dating world, it's what men would, or dating expert would advise women to do, like don't pay attention to him, go live your life. That's when they're gonna come back to you. Those were the two things I thought about. But before we get into that, how about you give our audience a background into P3 and what do they do exactly? What's the strategy over there?
Sure, but before I do that, I think that's really interesting what you just said, because I've been in so many meetings over the last 2 years, scratching our heads about why this has actually worked. And you may have hit the nail on the head there, that it's that reverse psychology in terms of dating apps and the way to consider yourself. I mean, I've been married for so long, I haven't thought about that, but that's a good point.
You don't want to be in the market, it's rough.
Well, thank you for that. But P3 is today a radio station for music lovers who are interested in popular culture and want to keep up with current affairs. Doesn't matter whether they're 15, 35 or 55. That's kind of the basic pitch of where we are with the station these days. At least that's what we're doing with the live radio station. And we can run through a little bit about what we did and how we got there and how we ended up actually increasing the audience in the old target group, which used to be 20 to 34-year-olds.
We are going to show you a video before we get into the conversation. You have that.
I think Kim has that up there.
Okay.
Vi kan lyssna lite på hur det har låtit.
Du ska tack.
Vilken ära att få ett sånt fint pris.
Apropå det, vi har en horse där. Har ni sett Dalahästen? Nej! Du är i sanning, Linda. Nej. Ljudlampa, Lis!
Ja, vi står där så här med...
Hiphop och jag är som natt och dag gjorda för varandra.
Speciellt min Petre hiphop-mix med DJ Juan ja, du sabes.
Du ser så rik ut.
Och då var det så där, just det, man ska kasta ut tvn. Men då var det en sån här kedja, du vet, för fönstret. Ja. Man kunde bara öppna så mycket.
Ah. Och det var på tjock-tv-perioden?
Ja, det var tjock-tv-perioden. Ja. Och då tänkte vi, då slänger vi ut fjärrkontrollen.
Yeah! Ja. Är det något jag ändå vill be alla så är det att inte titta bort just den här veckan och vara med och skänka pengar för att det gör enorm skillnad.
P3. Sveriges Radio.
Simon, that shows us that there is absolutely a future for radio. It's not just for old people, isn't it?
I mean, that's what we've when we sort of looked at what was going on with P3, this was about 2018, after 2 or 3 years of quite drastically declining listening figures. We did a massive piece of research to try and understand what was going wrong, basically, trying to understand who our listeners were and what people wanted out of a radio station like P3. Because the other thing that was interesting with P3 at the time was, even though we were losing a lot of listeners on linear radio, our podcast position was really, really strong. And we still have today some of the largest podcasts in the country. So when we looked at the things that were in common between our listeners, whether they listened to podcasts or the radio, we saw these three subjects. We saw that these are people who are much more likely to listen and even watch things on demand. So there are people who are not just listening to the radio, but they're also consuming podcasts, they're consuming streaming music in particular. They're also really curious people. Another trait that goes through whether it's they're listening on the radio or whether they're listening to a podcast is that they're really interested in finding out new things about the world around them, particularly globally understanding what's out there in the world. And then finally, they all have this massive love of music. We know that our audience are much more interested in music, much more likely to go to concerts, much more likely to go to festivals than any of our other stations within Swedish radio, but also compared to commercial radio groups.
It's interesting you spoke about, the podcast doing well and not the radio at first, P3 at first. How were you able to, move from that, integrate both, basically? Was there like a linear change between podcast and radio?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing was that we split up the way we programmed the radio station and the way how we commissioned podcasting. So we'd already been commissioning for podcasting for many years as sort of on-demand or digital first, but a lot of our shows were quite talk-heavy, and also we were broadcasting quite a lot of our podcasts at pretty prime time times on the radio. So one of the things we decided to do was focus a lot more on being a live radio station. I thought it was interesting. One of the guys who was on the stage earlier was talking about that connection he has with his audience. And that was one of the thing you on your drive time show. The reason that was a massive part of your media mix. That's exactly the kind of thing that we see, is that live connection with the audience has been something that we wanted to accentuate. The other thing was that the radio station was very difficult to understand. The schedule made no sense. There were all sorts of different shows that were having different kinds of target groups across different times of the day, almost as if it was a schedule being put together as a TV station. So we decided to make the station more of one room, so whenever you tune into the radio station, you feel at home. You understand what the offering is on the radio station. And then this bottom part here, smart entertainment, is about also using our podcast in a smarter way on the radio station, and also how we use our own newsroom, P3 News. But the middle part, better music, is also really important. And to give you a little idea of how P3 sounds these days, here's a short clip.
P3, Sveriges Radio.
All I need in this life is sin. It's me and my girlfriend.
Don't think I tried this one before. And you can hold me like you held her, and I will fuck you. Även om jag sagt det 100 gånger till dig, så skiter du i att förstå. For I've been having mood swings. Vi är P3.
So 40% of the songs you heard were Swedish, 30% of them were not songs released in the last 12 months. In the old days, we've had 40% of our songs have been Swedish artists for years, but in the old days, we also only played music from the last 12 months. I think in that clip, we only went back to the 90s, but we're even going back as far as the 60s now, and the music we play, particularly at the weekends on Sunday mornings. The last track you heard was Little Sims, the British rapper, with her track Mood Swings, which is also the record of the week on the radio, or the breakfast show 2 weeks ago. And I can guarantee there's no other radio station in Sweden that's going to be making that track their record of the week. So we've really tried to take a position as well to differentiate ourselves from what commercial radio are doing, and make a stand for distinctive, interesting music, but also music from our own country.
What were some of the results you then saw after implementing all of these?
So this was the thing that's surprised us slightly. I mean, when we made this change, one of the expectations was that, okay, we're seeing specifically in this 20 to 34-year-old target group, which is our old target group, specifically there we're seeing big challenges. We can also see at the same time that our local radio stations in the P4 group, they were doing really well in that age group comparatively. There was as many people listening to our local radio stations as there were listening to our youth station, which is also one of the reasons we started to look at this idea of, well, maybe there's a sense of connection around why you want to listen to a radio station that isn't based upon age. I thought it was really interesting, the thing that the lady from the BBC was talking about earlier. The football team, Stoke, the 22-year-old was listening about their match. I was listening to BBC local radio yesterday, because as you probably heard, I'm not Swedish. I grew up in the UK, grew up in a town called Norwich. I was listening to local radio, BBC Radio Norfolk, to listen to their reports about Norwich's match against Stoke, which we won. And just say. Anyway, and so we didn't have a massive expectation that we were going to make a huge dent on the 20 to 34-year-old age group. We thought that the idea was to try and stabilize things, basically. And so this is where we were in 2019. And gradually, even during the pandemic, even post-pandemic, we've seen an increase in the daily reach, in the amount of people we reach in this the old demographic. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. That we've managed to sort of put this together, despite the fact that we're no longer considering ourselves to be a youth radio station.
What do these numbers then tell you? Like, what would be a key summary if you have to explain to the audience what this means?
I think one of the key summary I can take from this picture, because this is our breakfast show hosts. The breakfast show is also doing really, really well now. And a couple of things that they've said to me in the past. Margaret on the right-hand side, she said that when we changed the music policy, that was one of the most important changes that she's been working in various different parts of Swedish media for 15 years or so. One of the most important changes anyone's ever made at a media company. She felt that suddenly the radio station was playing songs that resonated with the hosts. They weren't playing songs that they were pretending to like or just ignoring. And then David on the left. David is soon turning 40. He's got 2 kids, just got married. That's the kind of thing we would not have allowed him to talk about in the past. We'd probably have also said, once you reach the age of David, that almost 40 age, you wouldn't be allowed to be a presenter on P3 anymore. We'd be looking to bring in new people. And this is one of the shows that's now resonating really, really well across all age groups. I think that's one of the most important things, is the authenticity, that they're just being themselves and able to doing a radio station, making radio shows that they enjoy themselves or would want to listen to themselves. That's, I think, one of the biggest learnings.
The question I wanted to ask was, what do those results mean for the future of radio? I know it sounds cliche,
for the future
and we're all about radio, but it must say something, I think.
I mean, I think that some of the people said it earlier today as well, but this idea of being live is really important, of being authentic is really important, and I think that we need to celebrate those parts of what radio is more. And I think the more we talk about that and the more we just create good radio, it doesn't really matter how old people are. I think what people are going to will resonate with them and they'll want to listen.
What are the next steps for P3? I mean,
the next steps for P3, I don't know if I can tell everyone. No, the biggest thing we're doing right now actually is a massive project. We're turning 60 this year. Of those, 30 of those years have been as a youth station. The first 30 was more as an entertainment station. We're probably back to where we were at the beginning in 1964 now. And we're going to try and work out what the 300 best songs of those 60 years were. So P300 it's called. And we're getting loads of our staff, but also loads of people from the Swedish music industry and some of our listeners involved to try and work out what the greatest song was of the last 60 years. So that's the most important thing we're doing now. Yeah. That's also part of how we're trying to also explain the idea of the fact that we're not just playing music from the last 12 months anymore to people.
That is very interesting. Thank you very much, Simon. Do you have anything else to tell our audience?
Not right now, no.
Okay then, thank you very much. I will keep you, however, because we need to bring up a lot of our speakers on the stage. I wonder if they have anything to say to your contradictory approach. I mean, it worked, and at the end of the day, we are all aligned and fundamentally have the same message, but I think the strategy was different from the start, and I wonder if our speakers have anything to say. While they make their way up on the stage, if you have any questions as well, Menti is still up and running. I need to get that QR code. Yes, up there. We would also pass the mic around in the room if you feel more comfortable sharing that, but for now, you can just get your questions up in there. Kristoffer, I had a lot of questions for you the last time you were up on the stage. Do you have any reflections on Simon's presentation to start with?
Very thought-provoking. I think it resonates a lot with my take on a lot of the young citizens I've been interviewing. We shouldn't be maybe thinking about them as a certain type of human. They're humans, and yeah, give them good content. That's probably my take, and also, yeah.
Thank you for that. During Simon's presentation, Reece, I remembered something he touched on about how, you know, they were doing good on their podcast front, and they were able to, you know, redirect it back to radio and get their system up and going. That was something you personally implemented in your approach as well. You told me that when we had a conversation backstage. You did also say that the station did not understand why that was necessary. First, can you tell the audience how you thought that was the right way to go with that strategy, and then, you know, how you convinced everybody that it worked out?
It was tough in the beginning because podcast was over here pretty new, so we had to make a transition from podcast to radio, and same thing vice versa. So that was the toughest part about it. So I'm glad that everything works out, and all you got to do is, like, you got to give them your own content in full length, and that's what works for podcast the best. So it's just a transformation, so from radio to podcast, and the same thing vice versa, as I said.
You said something about, you know, the amount of music you played and how you worked with talents. I really found that interesting. Can you explain that? Maybe someone might find some inspiration from that.
Yeah, because it's actually a podcast, so I bring out musicians, even as rappers, DJs, whatever, and we do like the interview stuff and yada, yada, yada. It goes like, I don't know, from an hour to 30 minutes or whatever, and I had to, my principle was I want to make it artist friendly, so I try to play as much as of their music that I could play. It goes for like 3 hours, so I said like 10 to 15 or 20 tracks of that certain artist that I have on the show, just to give them something back, and in return, they love to come back. So yeah, everything goes hand in hand with that.
Nice thinking, Reece. I think that we should go next into the audience if anyone have something they'd like to share. I'm getting some questions on Menti here, which is great, but yeah, let's get it interactive to start with.
My name is Lindsay. I'm from Radar. We measure radio in the UK. My question is for Kristoffer. It's actually a methodology question, so as a difference. How many young people did you use in the sample for your survey?
Yeah, we had 44 participants.
And how many did you invite how many said no? What was the response rate like?
Well, it's difficult to measure because we put up posters and recruited people that way, so they signed up themselves. We don't know how many saw it.
Okay. Did you incentivize them in any way? Were they awarded anything?
In a small way, in a more token kind of way, which we have very strict rules in Sweden when it comes to those things. So, yeah, a little enough for a lunch.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It was actually the campus canteen, which is very good cooks.
Very relevant for the conversation. We have a question here. I'm just going to go to Menti because I can... Oh, there's a hand up. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much. I'm Zuzia, and I'm from Poland also. And I have a question to Simon, because I also like Mood Swings by Little Sims, and also the switch in music interested me. And could you tell me us a little bit more about it, and how was the music before the switch, and what is the characteristic of music after the switch?
Yeah, okay. So we did a massive piece of music research where we asked 4,500 people, if you're interested in methodology, about what their music preferences were across the whole of the country. This wasn't just for P3. I also look at music strategy for the whole of Swedish radio. And there was a bunch of things in that were really, really clear. Parts of that showed us the ideas that P3 and our classical station P2 are by far the stations that most people have sort of really passionate about music listen to. But in that we could sort of identify a few sort of music styles that were more significant for P3 than other radio stations. And that was a kind of a wake-up call to go back to some of the things that we were doing in the 90s maybe, that we'd kind of lost. I think we spent quite a lot of time chasing a youth audience, post-streaming, post-music streaming, if you see what I mean, by being very influenced by what was resonating on a sort of a music streaming chart, if you like, as opposed to understanding that music streaming is only a subsection of people who are really interested in music, and they're a specifically skewed subsection aiming at a very passionate young audience, skewing that chart an awful lot. When we looked at what the wider population is interested in, we could see that there were sort of a difference between what streams really well and what sells concert tickets, or what makes people want to listen to radio. So that's the kind of background to it. So one of the shifts we made was to start also playing about 30% of what we play is music from, well, basically any time period. We've sort of decided that even though new music is a massive part of what we do, what we also want to do is kind of, what we talk about is, I think this would be the translation, joining the dots between where music is today and where things came from in the past, and using that as also as sort of the central part of our music journalistic ambitions as well, to sort of that we want to also be one of the most I don't know the right word to say, but respected maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but at least we want to be in a time when there's less and less space for music journalism in general. That's a position that we think, it's a responsibility we think that we have as a music station to take on that role. So that's something we're doing as well.
Okay, so as I see it, you, instead of chasing the trends, you started to creating trends a little bit?
We'd like to think that, but I'm too shy to say that.
Okay, but you need some good music journalists for it.
We have good music journalists. We've also got excellent music programmers, and but also you need good hosts as well, who really wanted to, like I was saying before, having the hosts, the presenters, the DJs, whatever you call them, being passionate about the music they play, as opposed to feeling that it's something that they're made to play. That's also made a huge difference, because I think that in the end of the day, the listeners resonate with that as well. It's all about that, going back to that idea of authenticity.
So there's also more freedom to those DJs.
Yeah, they're much more involved today in choosing the songs that are played. Not every song, but some of them.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Are you a music journalist?
Yeah.
And were you shooting your shot at Simon for P3?
Excuse me?
Were you shooting your shot? Like, were you, strategically pitching to, I think you were. See, men always miss the cues, but now, Simon, introduction there. We're just going to go back to Menti and pick a question here. I think, Simon, you've spoken enough, respectfully. Iram, this one is for you here. It says you offer jobs in NRK to the greatest talents after the program, even if there is no need for new employees.
Come again? I'm not following.
Do you offer jobs in NRK to the greatest talents, like the best talents after you've recruited them?
No,
after the program, even if there's no need. Like, what is the retention rate of people?
Yeah, there is no guarantee that you will, after going the talent program at NRK Flere, that you will actually get a job. So basically, you have to work hard and get it. But the thing that we do see is that because of the fact that they have got this 5 months of training, then 5 months of working in a certain department, they have gotten enough experience to actually work just like any other journalist. They know all the production like tools that we make. They know storytelling. They know the concepts of storytelling and and basic journalism. So So they usually do tend to get a job. Usually it starts with a summer job, you know. So if they get the summer job, it's like a good sign. And then sometimes they start getting contracts for 6 months, 3 months. Some people have just right off the bat, like when they were done with completed the talent program, got a permanent job. So that has happened.
Yeah.
But there is no guarantee. Yeah. But the figures are good.
Can I ask, do you then see they go to other medias to get jobs?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Yeah, if we don't have any jobs, then they are applying in the media industry or to our competitors. And I mean, personally, I think that's sad because I'm losing a talent. But I mean, if you look at it in the long run, that's great because we're contributing to more diversity in the media industry by having them there, and you know, getting new young journalists.
Yeah,
so
they're taking away lots of, you know, talents and lots of things learned from NRK, reputable station like NRK to those new stations. We have another question.
Yes, hi, I'm Ulf from Swedish Radio. I have a question for Stine. Your interesting project with XR. You call that an editorial lab.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the formats that the new talent produced and where you publish them?
For now, they publish on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And the formats are quite diverse. I mean, it's mostly video. And then they had an idea that's coming out this Wednesday of a video podcast, a vodcast. We haven't done that before, but the idea was there, so that's why we're doing it. So, I mean, it's not set. Usually it should be video. They consume video, the target group, and then it should be on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Okay, so you don't have... There's not a need for drawing the audience to your own platforms?
Not for now, no.
But in the long run?
I think in the long run, I mean, extra shouldn't be there. We shouldn't need to have extra. And we will use the content extra creates on TV2 Østjylland's regular platforms.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's get some reflections from speaker to speaker now. Emily, you haven't said a lot so far. So is there anything from the presentations from your other colleagues here that you found very interesting today? Just one thing.
I think that there are a lot of threads that are quite common between what we've all spoken about, and authenticity seemed to come up a lot with everyone's work. And also in a lot of the work that we've been talking about, elements of community and building community also seems to be really important. So I think that, you know, when you're looking at building platforms that reach young audiences, they're probably two of the things to be keeping in mind.
Thank you for that. Chris, do you have anything to share?
I completely echo that. I think authenticity has been probably the most commonly word used today, and authenticity gives you relevance, whatever the platform. And the other thing that's come through today very strongly, I think, is that people, whatever age they are, love stories. And stories that have an emotional connection will always carry, and they will stand the test of time. You know, look at Netflix at the moment, and the most popular thing, it's a love story. Yeah. They've been there forever. But why do people like it? Because it touches their heart. And as long as we carry on touching people's heart, we'll maintain our relevance.
Thanks for that. I will go to Simon next, because when you weren't in the room, Simon reflected on something you said about why local radio works and how it's, you know, looking for the stories around you that really, you know, sells and propels local radio. I will let him repeat it so you can hear that you had a great presentation.
You already spoke
or maybe
about it
something
at the break,
else.
But yeah, it was about my football team beating Stoke. That was what we said, wasn't it?
Okay.
That's the one. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing like the power of sport. You know, in the UK, they have the FA Cup. And the FA Cup in England is massive. And there was a football team called Maidstone United that probably very few of you in this room will ever have heard of. And they got to the 5th round. And that was an amazing story for Kent, because Kent doesn't really have a football team, if we're honest. But it wasn't about the football. It was about the pride and the place. And local can reflect that. But also, you know, our challenges, which is why we can't ignore digital platforms, is digital platforms can be so much more local than we can ever be. And also, of course, the wonderful thing about digital platforms is young people want to curate their own content, just as everybody else does now. You know, I suspect we've all come here and we've downloaded a whole series of podcasts, which in the quiet of our evening, we will be listening to. We're scheduling ourselves, and we can't ignore those things, but that doesn't mean that the live human experience isn't still important.
Yeah, that is so important. Reece, anything interesting you've heard from your colleagues here today?
Thank you.
He's an artist.
Yeah, I did it. I did it before. I did it before. So yeah, I think when it comes to DJs, what Simon said about music, I think it should suit anybody, and authenticity is key. I think when it comes to music as well, because we have a lot of hosts, and I can say that as a host that doing shows they don't even like, so you can hear that, and I really appreciate it that you're going forward with that. That's nice.
That's amazing. Let's just, Chris, yes?
Oh, yeah, I've had many thoughts, but one thing, since I'm not only a researcher, I'm also a teacher. We teach a lot of broadcast people in our institution. We have very good facilities and so on. But you mentioned earlier that we need to start hiring people without a degree, and that kind of made me jump a little bit. I completely understand, because I've been teaching now since 15 years back. When we look at the people that come to our institution, that we teach, they're all from the same background. They all almost look the same. Many of them come from homes where their parents work in journalism and have media experience and so on. So it's a very clear, and also at our place we have 70% female students, which is good. Compared to other, I teach sometimes at Södertörn University in Stockholm, 100% women. So it's also a gender question when it comes to diversity there. And I mean, we always sit around scratching our heads, talking at meetings, what can we do about this to get more diversity and so on. And so it just made me think a little bit, and it's interesting to hear people outside of the academy think about how do you handle these things practically.
Yeah, thank you. Stine, I know you and Iram already reflected on, that conversation you both had, so I would spare you that. But there is a question here on Menti that I think you can get us started with. This person asks, how do we motivate Gen Z storytellers for radio? We have limited breaks, and they put in bracket 1 minute 30 seconds. We have researched music and a prime time at 6 a.m. and it all competes with social media. So how do we motivate Gen Z storytellers for radio?
I'm not quite sure that I'm the right one to answer this, because I'm not working in radio, and I actually think that we're going away from that. We are as well as the media house where I'm working at. I mean, we are not designing content to be used at specific times. We are designing content to be used when it fits you. So I don't think the task necessarily is to make it fit in and try to put it in the same box that we've already had, but trying to see, I mean, we have this kind of content, we have this kind of message. How do we get it to Gen Zs, even though they don't wake up at 6, right?
I know you love your job, and maybe you should work in radio. But about that, Simon, do you have any thoughts on that?
On that, I think one of the things that I think is interesting about TikTok is looking at the way that, compared to other social media platforms, the way a lot of stories are presented, and the way that we started to think about it, particularly on our hip hop station, Dingata, is about looking at the people who are working on that content and recruiting them in the same way we recruit a radio host. Almost in the way that MTV might have recruited a VJ back in the day. That kind of thing I think is interesting. And that's maybe somewhere where we can see a convergence, potentially in the future.
Yeah, but if I can elaborate on that, I mean, when we're not talking about EXA, but we're talking about Østjylland as a regional media house, we in 1 year grew TikTok to be the third biggest platform for our news content for the young guns. I mean, I think that is that we went into TikTok thinking, okay, how do we follow trends? How do we do all of this? But we decided to go on that platform with hardcore news. They love it, and they comment, and they follow us. And now when we ask Gen Zs, they know who we are. I mean, they've referred to their parents as they've watched it at Østjylland because they watched TikTok. I mean, TikTok has created the platform that could benefit.
We're not as far along the journey as you are on that, but we're seeing similar results since last autumn. Absolutely. Yeah. Sounds very similar.
I would say it's about trusting the audience. you know, they'll go to different platforms for different need states, and we saw that earlier on today. There's the young man who, you know, he listened to music when he was playing games. He liked podcasts about sport when he was going to sleep at night. And we should, in a way, and I say this as somebody, you know, who's worked in linear platforms for many, many years, we shouldn't be frightened of the audiences going around and sampling lots of things, because if the content is good enough, they'll come back. And that comes back to the quality. Make sure you've got the right thing there, not necessarily at a particular time of day, but the right quality and the right stories. That will always win out, because we want that human connection at certain times.
Yeah.
So I suppose I have to learn to be less proprietorial. I have to think about other measures rather than just radar. And that's a lesson that we've all been on and a journey that we've all been on, but probably increasingly that's the one we're going to have to take.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add to that so while I was working at ARN on Kjær, I used to hear a lot of people talking about how do we bring audiences to radio. And one of the ways of thinking that I really wanted to change internally was it doesn't matter where they're consuming our content, they're consuming our content. And so I think that idea of they might leave and they'll come back isn't probably the way to think about it. It's how can we make sure that wherever they are, they've got the opportunity to be engaging with our brand, consuming our content, seeing our talent, and all of that is an engagement. So
yeah, that's quite interesting. Thanks for that. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question they'd like to? Yes, someone at the back.
Vincent, I'm from Munich. Bit difficult to say, but I'm from Munich. I have a question for the large organization, people like Simon who've done many jobs in their company as well. Is there a specific organizational model for a youth channel in terms of structure and in terms of methods?
Is that a question for me?
No, it's a question to Iram, to you.
We don't have a youth station
anybody
anymore.
who has multiple channels, multiple stations in their stations. That's what I meant. Do you have a difference between P3 and another channel from an organization point of view?
I think in the strategy, the target audience is different. Like we also have we have a department in the news department which is called Young NRK. I don't know if it's correctly translated, but for them, it's the same thing, that we need to make content that people are gonna want. We're gonna have. They make it for Snapchat. Actually, that's their main platform where they publish. But also, if it's good enough, they try to. If it's a video, it's supposed to be on the main online version of nrk.no. So, well, back to your question. Basically, I think they just. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but basically for us at least, we have these sort of young department communities, journalists sort of working in different departments in the news, also in the child channel, children's channel. Thank you, and also collaboration with entertainment and the P3. We also have the P3 right there. So we have and they have this huge network. While they usually go for workshops together, they get together, they get in touch and get ideas on how to engage younger people, and all of that. I think the main thing is the content, what you're making, and not and that's what's most important. They need to make relevant content, and of course, platform is also a big part of the discussion. And NRK is we're not on TikTok. I mean, we do have that young news department. They are allowed, but we're not allowed to have TikTok on our phone because of security reasons. So we have a lot of different challenges, but the common thing is that basically the best content wins all, Yeah.
We had quite a different setup at Kjær. As we were building Kjær as part of ARN, and ARN also has WSFM and the Gold Network and the KISS network nationally around Australia as well. We set up Kjær on a different floor in a different part of the office, away from all the other teams, so that as a new brand within ARN, we could act as a bit of an incubator for new talent, new ways of working, and new ideas and new content. And so we actually built our own organisational culture, which also fitted with the Gen Zs and younger millennials that were working at Kjær, because the culture of the rest of the organisation maybe wasn't as good a fit for them if they hadn't always been radio people.
Add a thing to it, because I actually think in TV2 Østjylland we did the whole digital transformation like 6 years ago, and a lot of young people was hired, and right now we are trying to figure out how the organization can be fit for that, because last year we had 20% of the employees were on maternity leaves. I mean, that's quite huge for an organization to be designed around that. So and that's both women and men, right? So we know that it's not just about getting the young people in, it's about designing the organization to actually be agile, to move when the stages of life evolves around it, right?
Thank you for that. We have one final question in the audience. Carry on, please.
Yeah, sorry. It's a really general question for you all, and also perhaps for you all in the room over here. I'm Jörg. I'm from Berlin, QMusic Berlin. And my biggest question for all of you here is, we are talking about youth. We are all convinced that youth is the future and so on. But the biggest problem I have in Berlin, and I think everyone else on all these radio stations, is how do we convince our shareholders and CEOs that youth is more important than AI? Because whenever I look at my radio station, I see that the big prosperous future, of course, is somehow AI, artificial intelligence. We have synthetic voices, we have less costs and all that stuff. Whenever someone of you has an answer for me how to convince my shareholders and also CEOs that the prosperous future is to get youth characters who are authentic and has something to say is more important than artificial intelligence, please tell me.
Those are the kind of questions I like to
Sorry
close
for the
with.
general question at the end, but this is what makes me really angry also in the past and also for the future. But youth is our future and not artificial intelligence.
I love that question, Jörg.
Love it
So I would say that one of the things that I think is incredibly important is every organisation needs to have a translator who can sit in a position where they can speak to the board and they can also speak to the young staff, so that they understand what the young teams want, what young audiences want, but they can then translate that need and desire into the speak that the board needs to hear, which is about the commercial uplift, the increase in share price, the decrease in costs, whatever the kind of thing is that the board needs as their checklist. But I know that everyone right now is very excited about AI. When you start hearing, though, about two of those key themes that we've been talking about today, being authenticity and community, AI isn't going to bring you authenticity and community. It will give you a whole lot of other benefits, and I am also very pro AI in certain aspects, and I think AI is going to open a whole lot of doors for us, and it is really exciting, but it's not going to bring you community and authenticity.
A lot of heads. Yes.
I will actually say, I actually don't agree. I'm also the head of AI in our companies, being the head of innovation. And I think compared to the youth, it's not necessarily that the youth is important. AI is important as well. So to convince stakeholders is about how you're actually going to innovate with the youth and the AI continuously being a part. How do they benefit from each other? How can you then make your show even better, make the content even better, and actually using it as a creative challenge to become better? It's not necessarily avoiding AI, it's using it also in an authentic and a community way, right?
Thank you, Stine.
Just to add to that, so I don't know whether anyone of you in this room have read Elon Musk's biography. And in it, he talks about, obviously, he's a big fan of AI, and he's discovered when he was building Tesla that there was certain functionality that actually it was better to use a human being, and one was actually putting windows in, because it's really easy for people to use their thumbs, but it's much more difficult to train a machine. So I absolutely agree with you. It's about looking at where you can put the two together to deliver the greatest creativity, and that actually will enable us to serve our audiences even better.
There is an AI session at Radiodays Europe. I think that's on Tuesday. I can imagine the conversation there as well will be this fired up. But we have come to the end of the Youth Summit today. Please put your hands together really loud for Long as well, for our amazing speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Reece. Thank you. I can't wait to chat with you. Thank you. So nice. You too. Thank you. There were 3 more questions for you, Simon. I hope everyone speaks to you afterward. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of the Radio Days Europe. Bye.